Welcome, everyone. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Today is our second new grantee orientation webinar, and today we're going to be focusing on grant administration and the NCAL resources. I'm so glad you could all join us today. I'm Marty Washington. I'd like to just take a moment to thank the Office on Violence Against Women, who not only funds this program, but is also funding this presentation today. And I also want to mention that any opinions or findings or conclusions that you hear today are those of the author and don't necessarily reflect the Department of Justice or the Office on Violence Against Women. Anna, will you take us through some housekeeping?
Yes, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. We are just going to go over some quick housekeeping items before we get started. You definitely all know these, so there's nothing super new. Please make sure to include your name and your community in your Zoom box. Make sure you're muted unless you're speaking, just so we can reduce any background noise during our presentation. Questions and comments, feel free to use the chat function at any point during the presentation. This is a relatively small group, as this should just be project coordinators. So if you do have a question that's relevant, there will be also space for you to raise your hand and unmute and ask your question verbally if you would like to do so. If you have any questions at all tech related during the session, please feel free to contact me. The best way is actually through Zoom. Right now, I'll be with you all today. So feel free to privately message me and I can help you out if you need that.
So let's start with welcome and introductions. Today, we're joined by Janice Green from the Office on Violence Against Women. She will be sharing lots of information with you today. And then some of the NCAL staff. All of the NCAL staff is on the call today, but you'll be hearing from Victoria and Sarah and myself as the slides go forward. I'd like to just, I'm going to stop sharing for this because I'd like to look at faces, but I'd like to just have the project coordinators introduce themselves so we can see who's on the call. Can we start with Elder Options in Gainesville, Florida?
Sure. I'm Amy Thomas. I'm with Elder Options. We're the Mid-Florida Area Agency on Aging in the Mid-Florida region, exactly as our name says. So I also have Leslie, who I think is our main project coordinator, who's right across the hall from me. So I think she's having trouble hopping on. And then I also noticed that Jenna joined us today, who is from Peaceful Pass, our DV provider in the that we work very, very closely with here in Mid-Florida. So
okay. Thank you. Welcome. And then we have the Con Nation. Holly?
Good afternoon. My name is Holly Sweezy Duran, and I am the project coordinator for the Con Nation's Abuse and Later Life program. We are under the umbrella of their Victim Services program, which is Con Nation Family Trauma Healing Center. We're located in Newkirk, Oklahoma, and we serve Kate County, which is north central Oklahoma.
Welcome, Holly. And we're going to stay with Oklahoma and go to Lori from DVIS.
So Lori Gonzalez, Domestic Violence Intervention Services in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I don't see anybody else on here, but we've had, it's been total and complete chaos here. And half of our state is like snowed in and the other half is not. It's just been Oklahoma weather.
That's crazy. Well, yeah, this call is just project coordinators, so I'm not surprised. But yeah, gosh, snow in Oklahoma, I don't picture that. Let's go to St. Elizabeth in Rhode Island. I'm pretty sure I saw Jean.
Yes, I'm here. How you doing, everyone? I'm Jean Gategno, and I'm the project coordinator for a project called St. Elizabeth Community Haven for Elder Justice in Warwick, Rhode Island.
Welcome. And Alyssa from Idaho.
Hi, I'm Alyssa Gruen from the Nampa Family Justice Center. I also have Jennifer Perry. She's our project manager here. She's also on the call.
Great, welcome. Mike from Wisconsin.
Hey, good afternoon. Excuse me. Mike Austin with the Wisconsin Department of Justice. Hopefully we'll be bringing some other project coordinators on board to manage our project, but I'm the only one at the time being.
Welcome. And I did invite a couple of project coordinators who are not from FY22 because they came on board recently and had missed all this information when it first came out the year they were funded. So Harvey, want to introduce yourself?
Hi there, I'm Harvey Silberstein from New Jersey. I've been doing this for about 3 weeks, so I'm the newest one on the block, I think, and I'm excited to learn more information today.
Great, thanks. Welcome, Harvey. And then we have Nick Parker from Indiana.
Hi, everybody. Nick Parker from Indiana. Having some tech difficulties with the snow here in Indiana. Not as unexpected as Oklahoma, I think, but still a lot of snow. I'm with the Southern Indiana Project for Abuse in Later Life, and I'm very happy to be here.
Great, thanks. Okay, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. So I'm pretty sure we got everybody. Today, we're going to be talking about key aspects of administering this grant, including the special conditions and the reporting piece, but also really delving into the important and critical role of the program coordinator and some end-call resources that are available to support you as your project rolls out. With this, I'm going to turn it over to Janice.
Thanks, Marty. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Janice Green. I'm the Senior Program Specialist with the Office on Violence Against Women, responsible for managing the Abuse in Later Life program. I want to spend the next few minutes just going over some of the administrative things you need to be aware of with the grant. So we'll move on to the next slide. Everyone should, if you haven't yet, go into your award documents that are in JGS, the Just Grant System. When you go in, you're going to want to go to the spot where it says special conditions. Those special conditions are basically, your award is basically, once it's signed off on by your authorizing official, is basically a contract that you have between your organization and the federal government regarding the terms and conditions of which your project is being funded. So the first 19 are just very general conditions that apply to all federal grants. It's not specific to OVW. It's just various things. So for example, if you've been delinquent on awards in the past, you've been found guilty of fraud in the past, it just covers all of these things that you need to know generally as far as requirements or if you've had past issues. The next set of special conditions, it's about the next, I'd say 20. Those are specific to OVW, but they apply to all of our grant programs. So for example, we have rules about giving away things at events. We have rules about if you're going to hold an event, how much money you can spend, the fact that it has to be pre-approved. And so those are generic, but they're generic to OVW. And then the last few special awards are specific to the Abuse in Later Life program. And so they will spell out for you the things that you have to do specifically for this program. So for example, they will talk about things like the fact you have to send people to new grantee orientation, or the fact that you have funds on hold until you complete your needs assessment, or you've submitted your continuation outreach and services plan. So after you've had a chance to go through and look at all of those, I would say the most important ones to look at are towards the end. I'm going to say probably starting around number 50 and beyond, because they are specific to the terms of what you're going to do under this award. It will let you know, for example, can you use funds from this award to pay for anything while you are waiting for your budget to be approved. It will let you know how many people, if you're sending people to NIPEA, the Prosecutors Institute, how many people you agreed that you would send. All of that information is contained in those final project-specific reports. Next slide, please. A couple of years ago, OVW initiated a new policy. That special condition requires that all grantees within 270 days of receiving your award address workplace violence. If you look on the second bullet, if you do a search for that online, or if you go to our website, there is further information that Futures Without Violence, who is a TA provider that also works specifically with this grant program, has developed information about how you come up with developing policies and protocols around workplace violence incidents. And they are also available to provide technical assistance in helping grantees to meet the requirements of this new special condition. Next. So when you apply for the grant, we talk about a lot of things that you can do. You can do services, you can do trainings for certain groups. But the thing I want to focus on now, since these are the things that tend to create problems and get people out of compliance, is what you cannot do with your grant funds. So for example, you cannot do anything with our grant funds that would compromise victim safety. And here we've listed a few examples. So for example, you can't fail to provide language access for individuals who are deaf, hard of hearing, or individuals who have limited English proficiency, those folks whose English is not their first language. Not providing language access for them would endanger them and compromise victim safety. You can't require a victim who's seeking services to have to file criminal or civil charges against their abuser in order to receive services. You can't exclude victims based on any of these characteristics listed here. So sex, age, immigration, mental health. You can't refuse to provide services. You can't exclude victims because they, all of this information is included in your special conditions. So if you go into JGS, the special conditions sort of spell out for you all of the different things that you can and cannot do with the grant funds. Next slide. Another thing that you cannot do with the grant funds for this specific program is you cannot provide legal services. So when we say legal services, so you can't do divorce cases, you can't do any cases, can we go back to 11? Sorry, 12. You can't do any cases using our funds for legal services. The reality is this grant program doesn't provide a lot of funds for services to begin with. We're limited. And if we were to fund, say, divorce cases or other larger cases, it would totally eat up your services budget and would not allow you to serve the most victims as needed in your communities. You can do some very limited legal services. So for example, you can do something to try and stop the abuse or the loss of assets. So for example, let's say that an individual has given a power of attorney to someone and that person is using it to abuse or financially exploit that person. You can have someone provide legal services to step in to deal with the nullifying the power of attorney. But another thing you cannot do with these grant funds, however, is you cannot use them to pay immigration fees. That is not permitted. Next slide. You cannot lobby. When we talk about lobbying, we're talking about there's a difference between lobbying where you are sort of actively looking to create change as far as legislation, etc. That you cannot do. However, let's say that you had a legislator come to your organization and say, hey, we know that you're doing this sort of work. Can you just provide us some information about, like how many, are you seeing an increase, or do you have some generic information about elder abuse that we could use to inform ourselves? That's fine, but you can't actually actively lobby using grant funds. The other thing you cannot do is you cannot supplant other funds using federal dollars. And so when we talk about supplanting, that would be, let's say that you already had an advocate that was working full-time working with older victims. You couldn't then say, oh, great, we've got federal funds that we can do that with. Now we're going to stop using our local funds or our state funds, and we're going to use our federal funds to now cover that cost. That would be supplanting. You can't, if you already have a position or an activity that's already being funded by another source, you can't then have OVW funds come in to replace the funds that were already supporting that position. Next slide. Duplicative funding. So under this grant program, you have funding to do very specific activities. But let's say one of them is, under this grant, you said that you were going to provide, say, counseling. You were going to provide funding to provide counseling for victims to address the trauma that they've experienced. And let's say you've got another grant after this grant, which is going to fund the exact same thing. If you find yourself in a position where you now have a second source of funding to do something that you're already being funded under this program to do, you need to let OVW through me know as soon as possible, because if you're receiving funds from two different places to do the exact same thing, we would need to deobligate the funds from this award that were duplicating the effort, and then we'd have to figure out how best to use those funds so that basically you don't find yourself in a position where you were doubly funded to do the exact same activities. Next. Misuse of award funds. So unfortunately, every so often we do at OVW hear cases of individuals who have misused award funds. They've used them for personal reasons. They've bought gift cards that were supposed to go to older victims, and instead those cards end up being used by individuals within the organization. If it is determined that a grantee has misused award funds, they can have their funds suspended. They can have us come back to the grantee to recoup any funds that we feel were misused. The federal government can bar you from receiving any other federal awards, and there may also be civil and/or criminal penalties. And if a grantee comes to believe that they are in a situation where they find out that an employee has made a false claim for funds or has committed fraud or bribery or done something else that was inappropriate using grant funds, grantees need to and are obligated to contact OVW to make us aware of that, so that we can work with the Department of Justice Office of the Inspector General to take a look at what's happened and to address it appropriately. Next.
Janice, before we move on from misuse of award funds or allowable costs, there's a couple of questions in the chat box.
Sure.
You want to take them now? What about paying for a guardianship to get a victim out of an abusive situation?
That it would depend on whether or not that was something that had been approved in your approved budget for funds to be used for that purposes.
Okay. Jean, you may have to clarify your question. It says, can they do guardianships and?
When you say guardianships, you mean, for example, are you talking about going to court to stop, having an attorney go to court to stop a guardianship because it's the guardian or person trying to become a guardian is abusing the individual? In what context are we addressing that?
In Rhode Island, we have a different kind of guardianship probate court system, I think, from most states. And what we find is that we've had many clients linger in hospital for a year and a half because they don't have a guardian. And we work with legal services, but they're at their limit. So if we were to propose in our COSP that we would hire an attorney to do guardianship for people who are abuse victims, would that be fundable?
We would need to talk with our legal counsel here at OVW, our general counsel, to determine whether or not that would be, because would that attorney then actually be acting as their guardian?
No, they would be representing the elder in the probate court. They would be acting as the attorney for the elder.
But is the elder who is under guardianship being abused?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Abused.
Yes. We have seen guardianships go to abusers.
We would have to talk to legal about that because,
Right.
Again, here becomes the problem. You would have to be able to show that there was actual abuse by the guardian and not just that the person has a guardian that they don't want, because if there's no abuse, then
right,
you can't be funded under the grant at all. So what I would say is send me an email detailing what it is that you would want to propose, and I can take that to our legal division and have a conversation about whether or not that goes beyond what is permitted under the grant, because unlike some other OVW grant programs, this program does not allow statutorily for the program to do legal services.
Okay. Thank you. That helps to clarify it. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, you're welcome. Any other questions?
There's one more question from Harvey, and Harvey, I think you were referring to something specific, so I may have to have you ask your question off mute. It says, where is this grant info available? Were you thinking about something specific you were looking for information on? You're still on mute, Harvey.
Question is, where would I go to see the grant to read those special conditions that you referred to?
In the grant justice system, JGS, which is the system that grantees use to manage their awards, it's the online system. You would need to log into that. Once you log into it, you would be able to see any of the awards that your organization has given you access to. And then you can, once you go into the award, you'll see everything from your award balance, the special conditions, the award package, all of that information would be in there.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're ready to go. That's all the questions.
So under VAWA 2021, when it was reauthorized, it prohibits grantees from excluding, denying benefits, or discriminating against any program or activity funded in whole or in part by OVW against individuals based on the factors below. So race, sex, discrimination, disability, gender identification, sexual orientation, religion, color, and national origin. Next. So grantees are required under VAWA to maintain confidentiality around information from the victims they work with. Now, I know that all of our projects work on multidisciplinary teams in a sense. You're all part of a CCR, you have law enforcement, you have prosecutors, you have folks in aging, you have victim service providers. And we want you all to work together to, on a systemic level, improve the way that your community or enhance the way that your community addresses elder abuse. But while we expect you to work together and to meet together, you need to be mindful of the fact that you still have whoever is providing services to victims still has an obligation to protect victims' information and maintain confidentiality of that information. You can't simply share information about a victim just because you're working with other organizations as part of your CCR. And so in order to release or share any information about a victim, you would need to get a written release, and that release would need to have a time limit to it. The individual, the victim, would have to be able to understand what information they're releasing, and they would have to sign that, and they would have to consent as to who they're letting you share information with. The only other ways that you can release victims' information that is confidential is if you are required by court order to release information, or if there is a statutory requirement in your state that requires you to release that information. The thing to remember, though, is even if you are required by court order or through a statutory requirement to share information, you need to be very specific about what that court order or that statutory requirement requires you to release. So for example, let's say that you get a court order asking for the name of a particular victim or an address of a victim. You need to limit it specifically just to what the court order is asking. So you wouldn't release information about the type of services they're receiving, their phone number, are they in shelter? Where are they in shelter? You need to make sure that when you release information, you are releasing only the information that is required by the court order or by the statutory requirement. If you're not sure where you stand on that, then you should definitely reach out to your organization's legal counsel to make sure that you are meeting your legal obligations, but at the same time also protecting the confidential information of victims. Next. So financial reports. Grantees are required to submit SF 425s 30 days after the end of each quarter. So your first quarter under the grant would have been October, November, December. So by the 30th of January, your financial report is due. And that's going to go throughout. At the end of each quarter, you have 30 days after. And sometimes people get in trouble because they'll say, oh, well, that month has 31 days. So January has 31 days. So I guess I just file it on the last day. If you wait until the 31st, it will be considered delinquent because the requirement isn't the last day of the month, it's the 30th day of the month. And I've seen numerous times where people have had their funds frozen because they thought the 31st was fine. So just remember, it's the 30th of the month after the end of that period of report, financial quarter. And then your last financial report is not due 30 days because after that last report, once your grant ends, so let's say your grant ends on September 30th, we know that you're going to need time to pay any outstanding debt that has been obligated during the award. And so we give you 90 days so that you can go ahead and close out all of your financial obligations before you actually file that last financial progress report. Next. Under the Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act, if you have sub-grantees under your award of $30,000 or more, you will have to make a report at the end of the month following the month in which the application was made. And you can go to the website listed here to do that. If you're not sure whether you have any sub-grants under the award, what you should do is, again, go into JGS, go into your approved budget, and your approved budget will tell you, for example, did you have a sub-award under your grant, or did you have a procurement under your grant? And so if you see that you have a sub-award under your grant, then you need to, you can go to the website listed here to get more information and to do the required reporting. There is an exemption, however, if the gross income is under $300,000 from all sources. So rather than me trying to explain the statutory language here, it's best that you go to that website. And if it's still not clear to you, I would recommend you reach out to the Grants Financial Management Division at OVW, that's GFMD, and they can help you determine whether or not you need to file a FATA report. Next. So anytime you are creating materials using OVW funds, you need to include the disclaimer that is listed here on this slide. This disclaimer is also in your cooperative agreement in your special conditions. So if, as part of the grant, you are going to be doing the legal resources manual, you would need to include this information within that. If you are creating brochures to provide to individuals in your community, you would need to include this information on there. It doesn't need to be as big as it seems here. It can be small. It can be as, you know, small that it's legible so that you're not taking up a lot of space on a brochure, but the disclaimer has to be listed with your grant award number on any documents, any videos, anything of that nature that you are going to be putting out into the world using OVW funds. Next. So under this award, you cannot pay a consultant in excess of $650 a day. So one example would be, let's say that you decide under the new award, you know, we are going to bring in folks to do the advanced law enforcement training. We're not going to have our officers do it online. We're actually going to bring folks in. So let's say you bring in a law enforcement officer and a prosecutor, and they come in and they do that one-day training. They cannot be paid more than $650 a day for being there and doing the training. Now, let's say that you decide, you know, we're going to work with them and we're going to see if we can bring like a local medical professional in to talk for an hour as part of this. If you want someone to come in and speak for an hour, then they would be limited to 81.25. So basically 81.25 is 1/8 of an 8-hour day at a maximum of $650 a day. And if you decide that you're going to be bringing someone in to do a training, and it's not that someone automatically gets $650 a day. If you're going to do that, you would need to contact me at OVW. You would need to provide me with the resume or CV of the presenter and some documentation that shows that this is what they get paid by other individuals when they go out doing similar trainings. So if you have someone who's local who, when they do a local training, they get paid $100, they can't now suddenly get paid $650 just because it's being paid for with federal funds. Next. So as far as deliverables under this grant, that's going to depend on what you proposed and what was approved for your project. So some folks have opted to just do the online modules for law enforcement. And if that's what was approved in your project, that is fine. Some folks are opting to do in-person trainings for law enforcement. Same thing with the victim service cross training. If you are going to do the community conversations or the virtual training, that is fine. If you want to do the in-person training, that is fine as well. If you decide through this process that you want to have a conversation about making a switch, so let's say you decided, you know, we were going to do community conversations, but now in our community, we're feeling much more comfortable about doing in-person trainings than we did when we applied all the way back in February of 2022. We can, you know, you can reach out to me and we can have a conversation about switching from one type to the other. That you can just reach out and we can set up a time to talk. So just send me an email and I'm happy to schedule a conversation with you about it. Next. We are hoping to hold the first NIPEA, the National Institute on the Prosecution of Elder Abuse, sometime late summer or fall of this year, 2023. So if you're not sure whether your project is going to be or was supposed to be sending people to that event, again, you can go, I'd say the easiest place to determine that is to look at your budget. You'll be able to tell because you'll be able to see, is this training listed and have you listed money to send people and how many people have you set aside money to send to the event. Regarding the Judicial Institute, Futures Without Violence, who does that training for us, they are still in the process of determining when their next in-person training is going to be. And once we have more information about that, we will make sure to send that out to all grantees. Next. CCR. So all projects should, as continuation projects, still have a CCR. Under your first award, most of you met, especially in the beginning, on a monthly basis. At this point in time, I think you can decide whether you want to move to a monthly basis or do you want to move on a quarterly basis. You don't want to have a CCR meeting solely so that you can check the box and say, oh yeah, we're meeting every month, but no one wants to be there because we're not really doing anything useful with the time. We want to make sure that if you're working on your CCR, that you're meeting no less than a quarter, but that you're really using that time in a way that's helpful. So for example, now you've received this continuation funding, you need to really think about if there is no more OVW funding in the future for continuation funding, because for a number of years we didn't fund continuation projects because we didn't have sufficient funding to do that. So to start thinking about how would you sustain this project in the future if you didn't have this funding? Is there a position or multiple positions or a half FTE position that you're going to want to try to maintain after this award is over with? And how are you going to work towards accomplishing that? Also, to the extent that you started work around system change, what changes have you seen in your community regarding how this issue is addressed? And what changes do you still see need to be made in order to help make older individuals safer and in order to hold individuals who are abusers accountable? And then finally, victim services. Once your COSP is approved and those funds are released, you'll be able to deliver victim services. One thing I want to say is we were notified today about the status of budgets. And right now, with the exception of Wisconsin and mid-Florida, the other GFMD is telling us that the other budgets are currently still with the grantee organizations waiting for budget revisions to be made. So if you haven't sent your revised budget into GFMD yet, if you haven't gone into JGS and uploaded a revised budget and updated JGS with your new revised budget numbers, please go ahead and do so, because until they actually review and get your budgets out, you can't access those funds. And until that's done, even if your COSP was ready tomorrow, until that original budget is approved, we can't release funds to do victim services. If you're not sure what the status is of your budget after this call, please send me an email and I'll be happy to look into it and get back to you. Next. recipient responsibilities. So anytime that you are going to be creating materials using OVW funds, so whether it's a DVD, I'm not sure anyone does DVDs anymore, come to think of it. If it's a website or a webinar or a video or brochures, you need to send it to me at least 45 days before you want it released so that I can get it reviewed and it can go through an approval process so that you can access it and get it out there in your community in a timely manner. Next. If you are holding an event, it is required that any agendas or evaluation tools that are going to be used have to be sent to us for review. Now, this does not include any of the trainings that you are doing using OVW and NCAL training materials. So for example, if you're going to be doing the in-person law enforcement training, those documents, those agendas, all of those documents have already been reviewed and approved, so you don't need to send them in order to have them approved. Next. If you are holding any training events, you need to ensure that those events are accessible to individuals with disabilities, and that's accessible both in if someone needs a sign language interpreter, if someone needs larger font, if someone needs for the event to be held in a place where they can physically access the location. All of those things need to occur whenever you're holding any training events that are funded by OVW. Next. As you know, there is a hold on 33% of your award until your continuation outreach and service plan is approved. So if you haven't already started working on those, please know that you can begin that process. You can reach out to NCAL and they can work with you to begin that process so that you can get funding to continue the services you may have started under your previous award to make sure those can continue to be funded. Next. So in the past, when grantees got their award, we would allow folks up to $10,000 because they needed to go to new grantee orientation, and quite often the budgets wouldn't be approved by GFMD. Right now, because we are doing new grantee orientation virtually, you're not going to need access to $10,000 in order to send a group of people somewhere. However, if you have costs associated with participating in, say, new grantee orientation, you can use funds while you're waiting for your budget to be approved to cover those costs. So the typical example would be you have one or two MOU partners who are going to attend one or two of these webinar sessions, and they are going to be charging that representative's time to the grant. So if someone needs to be reimbursed, say 2 hours to attend the webinars, yes, you can go ahead and use grant funds to reimburse that person's organization for attending the event. The key being that it has to be you're compensating or reimbursing that person's organization and not the individual themselves. Next. Progress reports. So we work with the Muskie School of Public Service to develop a process for collecting data. That data that's collected is actually used for us to develop a report to Congress that goes to Congress every 2 years explaining what our grantees are doing, what the money is being used for. And we also include things like how many people have been trained, how many people have received services, if people have included comments about their project in their progress report that they think it will be helpful for Congress to know. They will sometimes include just narrative excerpts of what people have submitted as part of their report to Congress. Your progress reports also allow us to know, are there any promising practices? Are there any emerging issues? And then from a monitoring standpoint, it allows OVW, or in this case, which in this case is me, to make sure that grantees are in compliance. So when you submit your progress reports, I actually read every one of them, every page of them, because that will allow me to see if someone's falling behind and not moving in a timely manner, and they may need TA or just some support in order to get back on track. If someone has done something, sometimes people will report not realizing that they've used grant funds for something that is not permittable. And so it helps me to know what's going on with the projects and to help grantees, if they're not in compliance, to come back into compliance. Next. Your progress reports are due every 6 months. So your first one covers, in this case, since you started in October, it would cover October through December 31st, and it would be due to be submitted in JGS by January 30th. And then the next report would cover January through June, and then the next progress report would be due on July 30th. And then that's the cycle you'll always be on with this project. You'll be filing progress reports either on January 30th or on July 30th. Muskie is the organization that works with us to do training and technical assistance about these reports and to gather the information and help create the report that goes to Congress. If you ever need assistance regarding your progress reports, you can contact Muskie either by the phone number here, or you can send them an email at the email address listed below. Next. Muskie also, on their website, provides information for grantees about how to complete progress reports. And in addition to that, let's say you're working on a progress report and you need a hand. You can actually go, and if you click on this link, it will take you to a registration form where you can request one-on-one assistance from Muskie, and they will be able to help you work through whatever problems you're having. Also, if you go to their website, the progress report for this program is on their website. Instructions for how to complete the progress report is on their website. Training tools are on their website about how to fill out specifically for this program the progress report. So I would say if you haven't been there yet, especially with the progress reports coming up, the first place that I would go when you start thinking about doing your progress reports would be to go to the Muskie site. The other thing to keep in mind is I would not wait until the last day to get your progress report in, especially since if this is the first one you may have done in a while, or first one with possibly a new award number, because if there are any problems, you want to know ahead of time so that you can still make that 30th deadline. Because again, if your report doesn't make it in by the close of business on the 30th or by midnight on the 30th, the system will automatically shut down your funds. And because it's all automated, I have no control. No one at OVW has control. So if you contact me and say, we were just in the middle of submitting it on the 30th and we lost power due to a storm, can we get an extension? We don't have that ability. It's all automated. So give yourself the opportunity to avoid as much stress as possible and plan on trying to get it in at least 2 to 3 days ahead of the deadline. Next. Again, as I was saying, totally automated. There are the dates. It will freeze your funds. I think we've already covered that. Next. NCall is going to share with you a copy of this document that I put together called Common Progress Report Issues. Whether it is someone's first progress report or their final report, I tend to see the exact same errors on every progress report. The handout will sort of help explain to you how to avoid those errors, because when you submit it in, I review it. If it's not right, I send it back to you. And sometimes we can go back and forth a number of times. If you just, every single time you're going to do the progress report, just pull out this piece of paper, like I think 3 or 4 pages long, Have it with you as you're going through a report, and it will make your life easier and keep you from having to duplicate the process of completing the progress report multiple times. Next. So that is it for me. So before we move on to talking about the role of the project coordinator, does anyone else have any questions regarding grant administration, management, progress reports for OVW?
I think I do. This is Amy from Mid-Florida. The budget timing again. Could you review that for the first budget? I know the 33% is held back, but the timeline for the release of the new funds. Could you talk about that a little bit more?
Your budgets that were submitted with your original application have been submitted to the Grants Management Financial Division. Those are the folks here at OVW who review the reports. If they had any questions, and with the exceptions of, I believe it's Wisconsin and Mid-Florida,
yeah.
According to GFMD, those budgets they have sent in JGS comments about changes, updates that need to be made to those budgets. And until those budgets are updated in JGS and resubmitted, they can't review it. So if you're not sure whether or not
our comments were updated and resubmitted this week. So
and you're with what organization?
Other Options, Mid-Florida.
Yes, that's why I said, with the exception of Mid-Florida and Wisconsin, it's with other people. Right now, yours in Wisconsin are either have been approved. I'm not sure where Wisconsin is, but I know you sent yours in on the 23rd, and I've approved it forward to finance for them to now look at the revised version of the budget and either be in a position where they can approve it, and once it's approved, they can release the funds, or if they still have issues with it, they will reach out to you again to make any additional edits. And then you would make the edits, send it back to them. But until you have a cleared budget, funds are on hold.
So that was leading me to the FFR that's due next week, that's due now, essentially, right? The FFR for the first quarter.
Right.
If budget hasn't been final, would the FFR go in with all zeros?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, all right.
And that's not unusual. Even if people have money, even if they've had access to their budget, the reality is between September and now, between October 1st and December 30th, there's very little most people have done in order to put any numbers in that report. So that first report, for the most part, is a lot of zeros.
Okay, but we do have expenses for our coordinator. Would we be able to include those?
And you cannot obligate or spend any grant funds until you have an approved budget.
Okay.
The only thing that you could charge to the grant would be any time that folks have spent attending new grantee orientation.
Okay, got it. And I have one more, but not budget related, if that's okay.
That's fine.
The special conditions, I just want to make sure I think you mentioned the conditions 50 and above. I heard you mention the number 50, and I want to make sure
it's around 50. So here's the thing: when we I say 50, it's around 50. So here's what happens: there are a certain number, like the first 19 are definitely federal, like bigger than OVW requirements. Then there's a number after that are OVW specific. Now, some people, and I can't say exactly 50 because let's say that usually it's say another 20 or 30. So usually it takes you to number 50, And then after 50 is the things that are more specific to this program. But let's say someone's been determined to be a high-risk grantee. And now because they've been determined to be a high-risk grantee, there may be 6 new special conditions specifically just to that grantee that they have to meet because they are considered high risk. Now, instead of it starting at 50, it probably starts at like 56. So you just need to look at all of the special conditions, but you'll be able to tell when you go in, because this thing's very specific to this project says something like federal responsibilities, and that will list under that special condition all of the things that OVW is obligated to do as the federal funder and what they're saying they'll do. So under federal responsibilities, one of the things it says it will do is we will give you a project coordinator, a program manager, which is me, who's going to be responsible for doing things with you and working with you to manage your award. Then you'll find 1 or 2 after that that say recipient responsibilities. And those 1 or 2, which can be fairly long, will spell out for you the things you have to do. So let's say that you're going to do local law enforcement training. It would say that. Let's say you said you were going to send 3 prosecutors to the prosecutors training. It would say that. And it goes step by step, listing the different things you agree to do, send in progress reports, etc. So if you're looking for what's very specific just to your project, you'd want to go towards the end. And the numbering's never the same because every grantee is different, but towards the end, you'll see something that says recipients' responsibilities. And then somewhere after that, usually, you'll also see the information about the funds that are being held on the award and the need to submit a revised budget in order to get access to your outreach and service funds.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Janice, I have one question about the progress report this time. So we obviously didn't expend any funds, but do you want us to write about our CCR because it has continued?
Yes, which you could oh, that brings an interesting question. I'd have to look at your award, and here's why. Some of our awards are done as literally a continuation award. Do you know if you have a new award number?
Yes, we do. Okay.
So technically speaking, since you aren't using, well, here's the second question. Is your CCR, is anyone in your CCR other than the project coordinator being compensated for their time attending CCR meetings?
Not right now.
Okay, so what you can simply do is not in the CCR section, but towards the end, there's like that area where you can sort of put optional information. You can just make a note that even though we have not received funding yet, our CCR is continuing to meet without the use of OVW grant funds.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, sounds like we're ready to hear about the role of the project coordinator.
And as always, drop in the chat if something comes to mind as we go along. I also want to mention that Anna did drop into the chat a link to that document that Janice was referring to, common progress reporting issues, and we will be emailing it to you in a follow-up email. So, role of the project coordinator. Today, we've asked all the project coordinators to come because you are really a critical piece in the success of this project. You're the person who sells the project and the importance of supporting older adults who are experiencing violence. You're the person who organizes everything, makes sure all the special conditions are met. And so, as Janice said, it's a good idea to have those special conditions handy so you know exactly what you are required to do and expected. The project coordinator, this is a repeat slide from last time, but it's so important from last week. It's so important to really know that that your role is really integral to this project being going on as it should. And you are the CCR coordinator. There's a lot of different roles that you play as the project coordinator. Hopefully you don't have to be too much of a taskmaster, but it does happen in times because this project has a lot of moving pieces. And so you're the person who makes sure it all gets done. So at times that may be nudging or encouraging or motivating your project partners to help you with pieces of the project, communicating and administering. You need to be a budget analyst. Besides the special conditions, it's also a good idea to have your latest approved budget handy, because as a former project coordinator, I can tell you how many times you're going to keep going back to it and referring, okay, how many people did I say I was sending to that? Or what were the parameters funding wise of this aspect of our project, et cetera. So it's really important to have that budget handy. You are the advocate for the team, as well as being the leader. It takes a special person to be a project coordinator, not only outgoing and knowledgeable about abuse in later life, but having the passion to excite and encourage other people to not only become aware of abuse in later life, but care and understand that this is a topic that we all need to care about. It really helps if you have some kind of leadership skills in participatory activities, facilitating meetings, etc. It really takes a high level of organization. There's a lot of deadlines, managing different tasks and all the moving pieces of this project, and being able to communicate with your partners, not only orally, but also in writing. The project coordinator needs to strike that balance between being in charge of the project and managing it and taking on all the responsibilities. It is important to delegate some things, not only so people feel like they're a part of the project, but so you don't go crazy trying to do everything. You can't do everything. Successful projects are led by ideas and knowledge and the experience of the community partners. So you don't want it to just come from the project coordinator. The project coordinator might need to be very diplomatic at times to ensure that critical core concepts around victim safety and empowerment and offender accountability are maintained. So you are that person that makes sure that the whole intent of this funding is realized. Also committing to inclusivity of all members of your community and in all different cultures, et cetera. It's really important that your project look like your community. And that takes really knowledge and knowing who's in your community and what services they offer, et cetera. NCAL has been offering technical assistance and educational opportunities since 2002 for this project. And we want to make sure you're familiar with some of those resources that we have available to you. We have 6 staff members, and we're all available to provide the information and materials and tailored supports to you. But also know that our specific staff have certain areas of focus. And so we'll go through those right now. I guess I said that already. Okay, so we'll start with me. I'm the Abuse in Later Life Program Coordinator, and you all have heard from me in the past. I'm your point of contact. You can start with me if you're not sure who to reach out to, and I will make sure to make that connection with those. I also work with the listserv, and please know that you are on this listserv until you ask to be removed. So there's a lot of people on the listserv that their project may have ended years ago, but they like to stay in the loop, and they may reapply later, who knows, but they really want to be have their finger on the pulse of what's happening in the elder justice field. So so they do stay on this listserv. With that being said, if you put a question on the listserv, you're going to get some great feedback from people who really care about this issue. Also, I offer, my area of focus is the coordinated community response. I can't say enough about the project coordinator handbook. Seriously, I cannot. It's on the Abuse in Later Life, the grantee portal. And when, by the time we're done, I believe you're all on it, but we'll double check for sure. But you get access to the grantee portal when towards the end of new grantee orientation. If you haven't already, become very familiar with the project coordinator handbook. Not only does it have a chapter on all the different aspects of this project, so you can go and you can get, what are the guidelines of the COSP? What are the guidelines for that legal remedies guide that we need to do? What does the training look like? There's a whole chapter on coordinated community response. If you're holding an event, do I have to do a conference request form? There's information on how you know whether or not you need to do that in the project coordinator's handbook. So I strongly encourage you, and if you looked at it in the past, look at it again just to refresh yourself on this. It's a really important document that could help answer a lot of your questions. And I talked about the listserv too. Other resources available to you, and you'll find this in the chapter on coordinated community response. We have these systems change workbooks. These are all optional. You don't have to use them, but they're fabulous for starting the conversation. There's one for each of the different disciplines, that not only the mandatory partners, but also for the courts, et cetera. And you look at this, and it helps for agencies really to decide how are they going to start the process of figuring out what their current response is. What kinds of things can they talk about? This is one of the first steps when you're talking about systemic changes, to figure out where you are right now and what your agency protocols and policies are. They're worth a look-see for sure. In addition, in the same spot, there are CCR tools kits too. And if your CCR has been going on for a long time, it's a good idea to pause for a moment and look at where you are, how far you've come, and where you're going with your systemic change efforts. And this toolkit can be an important resource doing that. It's a good idea to just go through it either individually with your CCR members or do it as a team together. Once again, this is also optional. And I'm going to turn it over to Anne.
Thank you, Marty. Hi, everybody. I am Ann Lotch. I'm the Justice System Coordinator with NCAL. I know that this will be a review for some of you, but I'll be working with you on anything that you are doing related to the justice system. So your law enforcement training, your legal remedies and victim resource guide, prosecutor training, judicial training, all that kind of stuff. What I want to touch on here are some of the resources that are available to you through our website. So next slide, please. We have a number of resources, Marty touched on some of them, that are specific to particular professions and particular constituencies. So that's what I will be touching on, that legal sort of justice system content. So if we can go to the next website, the first page that has just a wealth of information that maybe you haven't explored too much is our publications library. You will be able to find information on tailoring services for rural communities, working with tribal communities, civil and legal remedies, tech safety, all kinds of things. We update that pretty frequently. You can find those CCR self-assessment tools for organizations to evaluate their capacity and approach to working with older adults. That's on that page. So I would really take some time to go through there and see what might be useful for your individual circumstances. The other thing I would mention is that if you are looking for something in the publications library and you can't find it, email one of us, because that may be something that we have in our files that we can send to you. We have a ton of articles and research that that we refer to ourselves, and we may be able to help you identify something that's on point for whatever you're working on. So please take some time to peruse that library. Next slide, please. Then the For Professionals section of the website, which you can navigate to from the main page, has curated resources for your partners who hold specific roles in addressing abuse in later life. So you will see a page for civil attorneys. We do a webinar series for civil attorneys that the recordings are located there. There is a section for domestic violence and sexual assault advocates, for law enforcement, for prosecutors, just anything that we find that would be relevant for a particular profession would be on those individual pages. Next slide, please. And then, as I just mentioned, we partner with the ABA every year or so to present a series of 5 webinars on abuse in later life for civil attorneys and legal advocates. So this is sort of the other side of, we do the prosecutor training for prosecutors, but for civil attorneys who may encounter an older adult who's in an abusive situation, who's maybe coming to them for a will or a trust or a power of attorney or a guardianship issue. We train them on how to identify first, and then how to best respond to somebody who may be in an abusive situation. So we offer that roughly every year, but we do have the recordings of the most recent series from this past year on our website now. And those are available to view whenever you would like. And with that, I think I will be turning it over to Victoria, who's our Victim Services Coordinator.
Thanks so much, Anne, and good afternoon, everyone. Once again, I'm Victoria Ferguson-Young. As your Victim Services Coordinator, you see my responsibilities and areas of attention are there on the screen, but all things related to just that, your Victim Services outreach, direct services training, your continuation outreach and service plan review, and then any other technical assistance or just guidance, insight information you may need on outreach and direct services for the older adults in your community. Go to the next slide. So next, I just wanted to, just share a little bit more with you about resource information as we're all talking about here. This here is an education series for advocates, which consists of 20 instructional video clips featuring different national experts on really important topics that are relevant to advocates. And so they're training modules that are, videos are each about 30 minutes in length, and they all have worksheets that accompany them with additional resource information, questions to answer. So they're really great to utilize with your direct service providers, the advocates that are a part of your domestic violence or sexual assault agencies in particular. But a really great resource to spend some time with and to get to know those videos as you are getting into this work. Or continuing this work for each of you. Next slide, please. Next, I wanted to share with you this Guiding Principles for Advocate Toolkit. So this is a great resource that describes 7 guiding principles for outreach to older adults that you would work with. It gives practical strategies specifically for advocates and programs to consider. And so it's a great resource to have, great reference to refer to. It is found also on our in-call website. And additionally, we are working on a one-pager that kind of summarizes and a synopsis of this. That's great for you as project coordinators, as well as your direct service providers, because it's the guiding principles will really work for the macro level work. as project coordinators, you're not necessarily maybe doing that, day-to-day direct services, but the guiding principles are just important to reference and to think about in your daily work, and all the work that you're doing in this project, all the moving parts truly have a purpose, and these principles can be really motivating as you're working on your project. Next slide, please. We have resources for working with the faith community. So what we know is that, and I'm sure many of you know by now, faith communities are so vital and critical in this work of working to end abuse in later life and to improve and provide services to older adults. Faith communities are just sacred spaces for many older adults, very important relationships, maybe have been part of their life for their entire lifetime or for a very long time. And so we've got some really great resources. Actually, we have them here as well. But it's called Where Faith and Safety Meet. And then also there is a toolkit within that as well, which provides best practices and strategies for domestic violence and sexual assault service providers. Really helps to build and provides information and guidelines on building partnerships, building relationships, of working together. Ultimately, we want to see faith communities really become much more resourceful for the older adults in their community, that they, know about your project and your services and, what's offered, so that they can make good referrals or can, make some connections for the older adults in their communities. Next slide. And so here, I just want you to know, typically we've done this in person. This new grantee orientation in person, and we would have a bit more of an interactive training on the dynamics and forms of abuse in later life. But since we're unable to do that, we did just want to kind of point your attention once again to our website, to these definitions and dynamics of really understanding more about abuse in later life. And so just want to remind you to, check these out, understanding just the nuance of abuse in later life, how that's relationship based, just the specific areas that you're really going to focus on in your project, and just better understanding those dynamics. So, as project coordinators, this is good for you to look at and for you to just familiarize yourself with, and then also for, of course, your direct service providers. Okay, and then next is a resource for working with tribal communities. I know that we do have some grantees who, are part of tribal communities, and this toolkit is really designed specifically for you, and that there are resources, information that are designed for working specifically with older adults in tribal communities, and just. It's a great resource and reference to have. So we really just ask that, you take a look at that. And even if you're not a part of a tribal community, go ahead and take a look at that. It's, it's important to know and to just really expand and understand kind of the differences or nuances in different communities. You may find that in your grantee community, you may have a native or tribal community that's close by, or that maybe you could partner or work with. So want to bring that to your attention as well. So hope that you get a chance to check those out and to review them and kind of keep them in your back pocket. And also want you to know that I too, like Marty, am a former project coordinator. So I've been in your shoes. And so as your victim services coordinator, if you, have questions about that, or just, especially things maybe that I worked on, that, just kind of getting that perspective, I'm glad to offer and to provide that as well. So thank you again for your attention, and I will turn things over to our Assistant Director, Sarah.
Thanks, Victoria. So Jean, I saw there you posted a comment in the chat asking if we have any resources available in other languages. I just wanted to address that before I started. We don't at this time, but that is something that's definitely on our radar. So thank you for airing that question. But unfortunately, we don't at this time. So hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Meyer. I'm the Assistant Director with NCAL, and I manage the content on the website, on NCAL's website. My colleagues have sort of addressed certain specific topics, but if there are other things generally related to abuse in later life or elder abuse, things like accessibility and aging and ageism, I'm happy to help either point you in the direction of resources that we have on our website, or like Anne had mentioned, we have a wealth of other things that are authored by other professionals and scholars that we reference all the time. So we're happy to share that out too if you if you're interested and would like that information. And then I know Marty touched on the grantee portal, but I also sort of manage and administer the subscriptions to the portal. So if you ever have any problems getting in or need a password reset or anything like that, I'm the person that you can contact for the portal. Next slide. So one section on our website that I think is really nifty is our video library. It actually has 3 content areas from 3 different projects that we've, 2 different projects and then our YouTube channel. But one content area is all subject matter experts addressing different topics related to abuse in later life. And then another one is the Lifting Up Voices project. Some of you may be familiar with that, but those are video clips of older survivors sharing their experiences with different forms of abuse. So they're really powerful, short video clips that you can use either just to, in your CCR meetings to sort of train on specific forms of abuse, or just for general, general information and just to hear stories about different forms of abuse. And then finally, there is a direct link to our YouTube channel on the video library page. And that has like countless other videos available for streaming. The things on our website are actually available for download. And then if you wanted just to stream videos, there's countless more on our YouTube channel. So I do recommend, as time allows, to dig into that, check out those different videos, because they are really, there are really some really great topics and discussions available there. Next slide. We also have a graphics library with some ready to use free graphics for what we like to refer to as 3 months in a day. So that's Stalking Awareness Month, Sexual Assault Awareness Month, Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. So there are some graphics that are specifically sized for different social media platforms, and then just for general use that you could resize. And again, they're all free to use. So you could check that out. That's the graphic library page. And then next slide. And then of course, just NCAL is on social. So if you would like to join us, promote us, share content with us, we're happy to boost you all too. So follow us on those platforms, and we'll try to amplify your messages as well. So I think that's all. I'll turn it back to you, Marty.
Thanks, Sarah. And I know Anna sent out yesterday the PowerPoint, so you have all this information there, but we will send out a follow-up email with that one document from Janice Green. But the bottom line here is we're here to support you. And if you forget who said what or whatever, just reach out to me and I'll connect you with the right person. So this is what's left of new grantee orientation. We have 2 more sessions left. Next week, we ask that you bring your MOU partners with you, and we're going to be focusing on coordinated community response. And then the week, and that'll be the same time frame, but the week after that, on February 8th, it's a 2-hour session, and that's for the project coordinators and your financial staff. And we will have OVW back with the OVW Grants Financial Management Division presenting. So some really important information. So we really hope that you're able to attend. Questions? Any last questions? There's no more in the chat, but does anybody, something came up while we were talking? I never seem to pause long enough, but if you do think of something, please give me send me an email and I will get back to you as soon as I can. And thank you very much. Very very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.